Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Talkoffame podcast. I'm Kylie Montigney as your host, and today I'm so excited to welcome Jenna Schutt. She was diagnosed with a rare, incurable disease at 30 years old with two babies at home. What carried her through chemo, a cell transplant, remission, and survivorship wasn't just medicine. It was a trained spiritual response she called the Joy Reflex. Welcome to the show, Jenna. I'm so excited to have you on and talk many things with you and how many things you obviously survived, which is crazy over the last few years, which is incredible.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. And yes, it has been quite the journey. I was diagnosed 7 years ago, and my youngest is 7. So that tells you he was very, very young. I actually started
Oh,
having symptoms right after he was born. So it has been quite the journey these last 7 years for sure.
I'm sure. Like, was he a couple months old, like when you started getting diagnosed with everything?
Yes. So I was diagnosed when he was maybe 4 to 6 months old, and my oldest was 18 months to 2 years old. So I actually had two under two. So I was very busy with motherhood in general. And then I started having all these symptoms, and I was diagnosed around then. And the disease, like you mentioned, is rare and incurable. So the disease is called systemic mastocytosis. It's a very rare disease, and it's kind of a mouthful,
Mhm.
but it is was told to me that it is 1 in a million. So I was sent
Really?
to, yeah, I
Oh
was
my
sent
God.
to Mayo Clinic, Rochester, which is the number one hospital in the entire world, and they are amazing. I can't say enough things about them and the Med Center in Omaha. It has been a real pleasure to get to work with them. The doctor that I saw was awesome, and he did confirm this is what it is. This is what we think is going on. And when you hear something like that, that it's incurable, that the aggressive form survival rate is 2 to 4 years, and you have babies, it is really something else. It really challenges you in ways that you never thought you would ever have to be challenged.
I'm sure. Like, if it was me at that point, I'd be like, okay, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, this is insane since it's like 1 in a million, you said. So that's like, and especially if it's rare, like, there's no cure to some things, maybe like breast cancer or some other diseases like that.
Right. And it's not as studied as things like breast cancer because breast cancer is everywhere. You hear about it, you see about it. There's so much research, so much talk about it. But these rare diseases, they just don't get as much research. They don't get talked about as much. So there's not as many drugs to treat them. There's not as much research going into new drugs to treat them. And when I talked to Mayo Clinic, about how many people have gone through stem cell transplants for this. And this is Mayo Clinic, number one hospital in the world. And he told me there are a handful of people a year that go through something like you have gone through. So that just kind of tells you a little bit about the rarity of the disease in and
Mhm.
of itself. And you get a diagnosis like that, and you don't think of it as years that you have left, especially when you have really young children. You don't think about yourself as just dying. You start to think about who's going to sing to your children when they're sick, and who's going to know how to like their eggs, and who's going to kiss their boo boos when they get sick. You start counting those birthdays that you might miss, or that grief kind of tries to settle in before it's even happened, and what things you might not be there for. And it's not just about yourself, it's about your children and all of those things that you miss. So it's just not a physical battle, really. You start out and you think about all the physical things that are there, the pain and the lymph nodes that are involved, and the liver and the spleen and my bones and all these things. But then you really have to deal with the spiritual side too, because finding that faith and joy and peace, which is what I talk about a lot, in the middle of that isn't something that's just passive. It doesn't just happen organically all the time. Nobody just handed it to me. I really had to decide actively to walk in that and keep deciding it every single day with every new challenge that came
Mhm.
across my plate, which was a lot.
I'm sure because I feel like for me, it's like I would think all the worst possibilities if I was in that situation. For me, I'd be like, if I had two young kids at home, like a newborn, like you said, and like a 2 year old or whatever that may be at home, and a husband, I'll be like, what's the point of life? Like, I got diagnosed, I literally just had kids.
Mhm.
Like, what is a possibility of that? Why couldn't it happen earlier before I had kids? So you think of all the worst possibilities, and that's perfectly okay. And for me, it's kind of like I see more than a negative than a positive. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like you think of all the negatives of maybe this specific disease, or
Mhm.
maybe another disease like, regular cancer or Parkinson's or whatever it may be that take people's lives about a couple thousand to millions a year.
Yeah.
Like one of those diseases, but with a disease like yours, it's very weird for people to even know about. Like I didn't even know about the disease until you told me. So it's kind of like that topic is like very rare and this needs to be talked about more because I was like, what the heck is this disease and what exactly is it? Like this
Yeah.
is like doctors don't know too much about it and the research behind it.
No, and there's a lot of times that I'll go to a doctor appointment and I'm explaining to them what this is and what that looks like and what is going on because it is so rare. And I'll have doctors tell me, I don't know as much as you probably know about this because this is not talked about very much. It's not seen very much. And what's interesting about the disease in and of itself is that it is overproduction of mast cells, which
Mhm.
everybody has in their body. So your mast cells, I was a nurse, so that's why I'm kind of getting a little sciencey on you.
Mhm.
But I was a nurse before I had my children, and so the mast cells are what responds to an allergic reaction, right? So when you
Mhm.
have an allergic reaction, the mast cells are what fire and they stimulate and put out all that histamine. So that is what you think of mast cells. That's what those are. But in mastocytosis, which is what I was diagnosed with, they are just everywhere. They get into the lymph nodes, they get into all over your bones because it's a bone marrow disease. It goes everywhere. So my liver, my spleen, my lymph nodes, my bones, my lungs, my brain, everything. It got in everywhere and it affected every single thing. And I
Mhm.
remember when I got diagnosed, and I remember this moment so clearly because I was on the phone with my regular practitioner and she had done a scan to see what was going on with all these symptoms I was having. And I remember my 2 year old was standing right next to my husband, and my husband was holding my baby while I was on the phone. And she told me, "You're going to have to go see the oncologist," because she said, "I don't know what this is. You need to go see oncology." And being a nurse, my nurse brain immediately just tried to go into a panic of
Mhm.
what does this mean? My kids are standing right behind me. My husband is standing right behind me. I just had a baby. My life as a mom had just started.
Mhm.
I just started being a mom, which is what I always wanted to be.
Mhm.
And here I am being told, you're going to have to go see an oncologist because we don't even know what this is. And I
Mhm.
remember sitting there and just thinking, what am I going to do? And I remember saying, I'm going to give myself 1 minute, 1 minute to let this hit me completely and totally and fully and feel the whole weight of it. So I acknowledged it, like you
Mhm.
were saying, it's not something that I just pushed away, that I denied, that I tried to just shut down. I was like, nope, this is here. This is real. I didn't try to stuff it down or pretend. I just said, all right, I'm giving myself 1 minute. And when that 1 minute was over, I remember just thinking, okay, game on. That
Mhm.
was it. I am going to fight this thing. And that was what I call the joy reflex before I even had a name for it. It was
Mhm.
just there. You acknowledge it, you acknowledge what's real. Faith does not deny reality. And I say that a lot because I think that there's a lot of faith people who want to just say, oh, no, I'm fine. No, it's fine. There's nothing going on here. And that's not, doesn't mean you have to deny what is going on.
Mhm.
Faith doesn't deny the reality, but it does show you how you're going to walk in that reality. It allows you to walk in that reality without panic and anxiety and fear throughout the whole thing.
That is literally what I was gonna say because when because I deal with anxiety and depression, and for me, it's kind of like I usually say I'm fine to everyone, which is, not the most normal thing ever. It obviously is the two different things, obviously. But when you are going through life's decisions, whether it's health problems, mental health, or just maybe family problems, for example, everyone will say they're fine compared to like, oh, I'm dealing with this, and people tend to hide their feelings even if they're very sick with something, but I want to act like everything's fine. But for these type of diseases, you have to have a support system around you. Because, of course, with the disease you had or have, you have a support system. You have two little ones, especially being just diagnosed. Like, it sometimes feels like it's impossible.
Mhm.
And for me, it's like if I was in that situation, I feel like it will take me so long to recover. And for me, like to kind of wrap my head around everything and I feel like it would sit in me for so long that I feel like I can't express it.
Mhm. And I think that's something too that you talk, and we hear this a lot, especially I feel like as women, we get that toxic positivity, right?
Mhm.
So you hear somebody who's just had a newborn and they're dealing with maybe postpartum depression or just being with a newborn and you're up every 2 hours and you're so tired and you're like, I need help. And the first thing you hear is, you got this, mama. You can do it. And it's like, okay, that is wonderful. I thank you so much, but that's not going to help me at 2 a.m. when
No,
I am barely
exactly.
getting
Like
out
the
of
early
bed.
stages of having like a few weeks. So is that the early nights? I literally
Yes,
say that from so many people. I'm just like,
yes,
oh my God, how do you live? Like, how do you even do that? Because if I
yes.
only get 6 hours of sleep, for me, I lose it. So I'm like, I don't know how you guys do it because I literally go nuts if I get at least 6 hours.
Right. And it's the same with like people who are going through chemotherapy, stem cell transplants, et cetera. You will have those times when you're barely able to eat. You feel miserable. Like everything you're eating is coming back up. And someone will say, well, you look good though, because you've lost weight. And you're like, oh, you look great. And you just think, well, thank you so much. But that doesn't fix everything. It doesn't
Yeah.
fix
Some people
anything.
think like, okay, this makes me kind of feel worse.
Yeah, and I call that toxic positivity. I think that's something that is being talked about more and more. And it kind of wants to skip over the hard, it wants to skip over what's
Mhm.
real. And it tells you to just kind of perform, put on a happy face and smile and all those things. And that is not what I'm talking about when I talk about joy. That is not what I mean when I say the joy reflex. The joy reflex is starting with acknowledging what's going on,
Mhm.
acknowledging that this is real and this is hard and this is not a great situation that I am in
Mhm.
right now. Because, like I said, faith is not denial of the circumstances, but how
Mhm.
you're going to walk through them. And then you anchor yourself in the Lord. You anchor yourself in what his word says about you, in worship music, in your support systems, like you talked about, your community. I have a very strong family community, church community, and my husband is amazing. My mom is amazing. And it's anchoring in that and anchoring in what his word says and in his promises, and then taking those next steps, just taking one step at a time, not the whole staircase, not the whole thing, but just one faithful step after another. And I
Mhm.
talk a lot about this in my monthly devotionals and my weekly YouTube lives, that faith and medicine don't have to be an either or. They can be an and also. Because
Mhm.
I truly believe that if you have anxiety or depression or an incurable illness or a broken bone, or you are dealing with grief, or you are dealing with financial issues, you can go see people to help you.
Mhm.
That is not against your faith. I think some people think it is, and it's not. You can go see a doctor if you need to see a doctor. You can take medicine if you need to take medicine, but you can still stand in faith and have joy and have peace right in the middle of it. And that is what my whole book is about. That is what the joy reflex is. That is
Mhm.
what it is all about, is being able to survive in the middle of those things and be at peace and be in joy, even in the hardest times, while still doing the things that you have to do as a mom, as a person, as a wife, as, if you're working, whatever that thing is.
Like for me, it's like faith matters most in a lot of people's lives, including myself. And I feel like through the hardest times, faith is sometimes what is the only thing you get through life right now. Because like faith is probably one of the most important things in your life, if not the important one.
Mhm.
And for me, it's like faith got me through some of my hardest times. I know for you, it has helped you as well. And growing up, I kind of come from a religious family. Like, I was not really religious. Like, this anxiety, like, my anxiety kind of led me not to go like to like church or anything like that until like I got older and then decided to go. So, like, in like recent like year or two, I decided to kind of get myself involved in more of that since I kind of like didn't want to kind of like miss out and regret it. And I, with mental health, that really was like, okay, this will help. But it really does help you in the long run. Whether if you're dealing with a disease, at least spend time like maybe listening to worship music a couple minutes every day or having a Bible like of some sort or whatever it may be, or just go to church for a few minutes and go by yourself and just sit there for a few minutes and leave. You like it doesn't matter what you do. But any some sort of small thing like that in faith and all whatever that helps you can be so important for you as well.
Yeah, and I think too, like you said, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be a huge step. You can just take that next step. Just listen to some word. Just get something inside of you. Just reach out to a friend. Just reach out and say, I need prayer for this. Will you agree with me? Will you pray with me? Will you go to church with me? Will you listen to this with me? And it's not just what the Bible says because science talks about this too. And like I said, I'm a nurse, so I kind of get a little nerdy about this. But if you learn about neuroplasticity, you science has shown you can literally change the way that your brain thinks and the way that your brain will work by completely making new practices.
Hmm.
So you change the way you think by a repeatable practice patterns. And that's what the Joy Reflex gives you. It gives you that pattern of how to change your neural pathways so that you can start going towards faith, going towards joy, going towards peace when
Hmm.
circumstances come up. And it's just what I talk about as a reflex. So when you think about a reflex, it's something that triggers automatically. Like if you were going towards something hot, your hand is going to reflex, it's going to pull back. And that joy reflex is training those
Hmm.
spiritual muscles to be stronger than the fear and the anxiety that wants to try to come because that's natural.
Hmm.
Naturally, if you get diagnosed with something incurable, your brain is going to want to go towards fear and anxiety and all the what ifs,
Yeah, and like
all
a
of those
fight or
things.
flight response, like you
Yes,
don't know what to do.
exactly. And I talk about that too, that that is a normal body response. Your body wants you to either run for the hills or fight for its life
Hmm.
because it's hearing that there is something wrong.
Yeah, and
And
you can do both if you want to. It
yeah,
depends
and
on
that
what you are.
yeah, and that's the whole point of the reflex is it's training your spiritual muscles to respond reflexively before fear and doubt and grief and anxiousness just completely takes over.
Like, did you ever try or heard of the let them theory by Mel Robbins?
I have heard of Mel Robbins. She has an awesome platform
She
for
does.
sure.
She has multiple books. I wasn't sure if you knew of her or not. Like I read of her books, like the Let Them Theory and like the 5 second rule. And once you brought all the stuff, I was like, you probably know what this is or tried it.
Mhm.
And for me, like those two things have helped me so much. I don't really
Mhm.
use them unless I really have to.
Mhm.
But those two things, like if you're dealing with a disease or struggling or whatever, those two books or practices really do help you. It does actually help you from experience. It helps me when I'm using them. But it really, you have to try to find as much resources as you can because I know for a lot of people, you can't go through things like this alone, for example. Like for things, you have to have a good support system, which I'm so glad you have because you can like you deserve to have people around you, whether it's one person, five, 10 people, at least have someone in your corner, whether it's your husband, mother, father, sibling, it doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah.
Like as long as you have that one good person, that's the most important thing. You have to always have to find that resource because if you don't find the resources, you can't help yourself.
Yes. And I think going back to the Mel Robbins, just let them, that's very similar to just acknowledging it. Just acknowledge this is the situation that I'm in. These are the thoughts that are trying to come. These are the feelings that are trying to come.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to deny that they're here because they are here. But
Mm-hmm.
then shifting that focus away from those thoughts and those feelings and pivoting. So then let's pivot from these thoughts. And I talk a lot about that too in my monthly devotional about it's really easy sometimes to look at the giant instead of the slingshot that's in your hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of focusing on the giant, say, okay, I acknowledge the giant is here. Here he is standing right in front of me. I am completely in the shadow of the giant right now, but I still have something with me that I can fight with. And that is the anchoring yourself in the Lord. So anchor yourself in those things that the Lord says about you. And it's not just medical. You know, it doesn't just have to be medical. There's people that are having financial crises, that are having relationship issues, that are having issues with their children, with their siblings, with their spouse. You know, joy and peace is not just for medical things. That's what I used it for because that's the situation that I was in. But
Mm-hmm.
that it can apply to anything and just anchoring yourself in what the word says about you. So for me, I would anchor myself in that the Lord says I'm healed and I'm not sick, that I have not been given the spirit of fear, right? I
Mm-hmm.
have power and love and a sound mind. But for other people, it might be that I have more than enough supply, you know, that God supplies all my needs. And anchoring yourself in those things and pivoting so that you're not just standing in that giant's shadow, but you see that slingshot and you say, okay, like what I did, I said, okay, game on. Like, I'm going to fight this thing. I am going to do whatever I have to do to stay around, to be here for my children, and not just to live inside these circumstances for these last 7 years in a place of defeat, but that I'm going to live these years the best that I can live them. And
Mm-hmm.
then to walk out that next faithful step, which is what I've been doing for the last 7 years. There were times when I couldn't breathe. There were times I got a blood clot in my neck, in my jugular vein, in my neck. I got a blood
Oh
clot.
gosh.
Yes, I had this entire lung was fluid. I literally, you could see this much of the lung, the rest was fluid. I could barely take a breath sometimes. My liver was failing, and I had my stomach filled up with fluid, had to be drained time after time after time again. I had was supposed to be a simple outpatient procedure, and my artery that's connected to my carotid artery that's up here got nicked. Walked into the ER in hemorrhagic shock.
Oh.
Hemorrhagic shock. Walked into the ER, went into emergency surgery, was unconscious for a couple of days in the ICU, and I walked out of there and I built myself back up again after all these things. And I didn't just do that alone. I did that with my support system, my mom, my brother, my husband, my family, my church family. And I did that with standing on what the Lord says, what the word says, and knowing that what the word says is the joy of the Lord is my strength.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you right there that is not just an emotion. It's not just happiness. And I say this too, it's not just butterflies and rainbows. You know, that's
Mm-hmm.
not what joy is. It is a literal strength, an infusion of strength to you in your time of need. That is what the joy of the Lord is. And that is what my book is about. That is what the devotionals are about. My lives are about. I talk about that a lot, that it's not just woohoo, this is so much fun. I'm having so much fun lying in the hospital bed. That is not
Like
what this
that
is.
is literally the total opposite. I'll be like, how if you do, I'm like, how? Like, how
Yes,
is this possible?
yes, like that is not what that was. But I will say, I always try to have a positive attitude. I always try to find the humor in it. You could ask my doctors, you can ask my mom. I'm always joking around about it because I told my husband this a long time ago. I can either laugh about it or I can cry about it, and I am not going to cry about it. Like,
At least have some positive humor. That's how
that's
you
right.
get through is the humor.
That is right. And it's one of those things where it's like maybe it's a little dark humor, but it's about myself. So
But
it's
it's
like I
okay.
can,
It could be worse. It
yeah,
could be someone else. At least it
yeah,
becoming yourself. Okay.
right.
It could be totally different. But before we wrap up, like, do you still have problems with everything, though, if you don't mind me asking? Like, do you still have those issues the same as maybe like 5 or something years ago?
Right. Because the disease is incurable, I still am on oral chemo. So I think a lot of times people look at a stem cell transplant or IV chemotherapy or that you have done all these things and that's the finish line. And it is just the starting line of a whole new fight. So they call it survivorship because you are in this whole new realm. So I now am still on oral chemotherapy, but now I'm also dealing with graft versus host disease, which is where the donor cells are fighting with my cells and cause inflammation. So it has gotten into my liver, it has gotten into my eyes specifically. And if you
Mhm.
go to my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook, all those things, you can see my scleral lenses, which are these extremely hard plastic lenses that I have to take out and put in with a plunger in my
Mhm.
eye. And I have to wear them all day and almost all the way to the end of the night. Because if
Oh
I
wow.
don't, it feels like when you get soap in your eye when you're in the shower
Mhm.
all the time. That's
Oh
what it
yeah.
feels like. So it is very, very like acidic feeling. So I have to do that all the time. And now they've got me wearing these bandage lenses all through the night. So essentially, I have to have something covering my eyes 24/7 because my eyes don't produce tears anymore.
Oh really?
They don't produce tears
Oh.
anymore. So they are completely dry. So I put drops in all the time. I have those hard, hard lenses. And I just started a new IV infusion every 2 weeks that is supposed to help with this. So it's definitely not as severe as it was 6, 7 years ago,
Mhm.
but it is still a process. It is still a fight to
Mhm.
live and to live in the best circumstances that I can while still dealing with this. And I'm only 37 years old.
Mhm.
So when I got diagnosed, I was 30 years old. I just had my babies. And so I want to live like that long, 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 healthy life. So I still have to do these things now to protect myself and to
Mhm.
make sure that in 30 years, which is still not even that old,
Mhm.
that I'm still healthy and showing up for my kids and showing up for my family.
That's the most important thing. As long as you're doing the best you can for also yourself and for your family, I feel like that is literally the most important thing you can also do.
You just keep going. That's what I've said. I just keep going. I just keep taking the next step. Just keep going day after day.
That's the most important thing. And I think that is the best way to kind of wrap up this episode. I definitely would love to have you on again to talk more about this. But I
Yes.
really appreciate you coming on and taking the time with us and sharing your story. I'm so glad you reached out. And I'm so glad like you were fighting. Like you definitely are a warrior. And let me tell you that right now. And I really appreciate all that you do and also being so open and vulnerable with us. I know it definitely can be very hard with doing that. So I really appreciate you being so open and everything.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It has been awesome just getting to talk about it. And my whole ministry and my whole point of doing these devotionals in this book is to just help other people feel encouraged and know that it's not just for me, that they can do it too. So if you want any of these things, feel free to come to my website, which is just my first name, last name,
Mhm.
jennaschutt.com, and sign up for the devotional. It's totally free and you can check me out and see some pictures of what I was like, what I went through. I have all of that on the website so you can learn more about me. And I would love to be back and talk with you more. This has been so fun.
Yeah, that'd be so fun. And I'll also put your website and everything in the link in the
Perfect.
description so people can like definitely check out some like typing so many things. It definitely will be a lot easier.
Yes.
But thank you so much for coming on. It means so much. And thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to check her out in the description. I'll make sure to put everything in the description for you guys to check out. And thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, and review. And I'll talk to you guys very soon.